Welcome back to Dynamic Entry. It is me, the professional henchman. Hello, huzzah, good day. I have returned. This time to talk about the 8 episodes Netflix has provided us for Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry is very near and dear to my heart, and it's one of the first games I ever played when I first got a PlayStation and joined the Sony household of console enjoyers. That's all to say that I know a thing or two about Devil May Cry. That being said, that information may or may not be useful because Netflix has chosen to go the route of doing their own thing on this adaptation. Personally, I think that's pretty important. When a company gets access to a property, I think it's always best that they try to do things in their vision, but that's not exactly the most popular opinion. So, now with the release of the episodes themselves, we can see if Netflix managed to get enough smokin' sweet style to stand on its own 2 legs with Devil May Cry and their personally crafted story, or if it was garbage. Let's talk about it. The anime opens up with a heist in the Vatican City where a magical sword is pilfered by a Spec Ops group who is soon dispatched by their benefactor, a figure known as the White Rabbit. The White Rabbit will serve as the main antagonist for the Devil May Cry anime, and we'll see more of what they have in store for us as the show continues. From there, we pick up with a revelation that there are darker forces out in the world. There is a group known as Darkcom who is out there in America trying to put a stop to things. Shout out to Darkcom. All of their battle armor appears to be Captain Commando's battle armor, which I think is very cool. And just tangentially, as far as that's concerned, there's a lot of love for Capcom's properties sprinkled throughout Devil May Cry, and I think that's really cool. I'll try to bring them up as I remember them talking about things. Why don't we pick up from here at the introduction of Dante? I watched the dub this time around. I've actually started to rewatch some scenes in the sub for argumentative purposes. But in the dub, we get Johnny Young Bosch fulfilling the role of Dante now, who originally was cast as Nero in the games, but since Ruben Langdon's retirement from the acting, the role itself, it's been passed on. So it looks like Johnny has picked up the torch where things stand. And I think he actually does a decent job as the more lighthearted Dante. This Dante in the show is probably somewhere between like 17 to 18. I believe in Devil May Cry 3, he's about 18 years old. So attitude-wise, they're slightly similar. Though this Dante comes off far less sure of himself and far less confident than other Dantes that you see throughout Devil May Cry. It's very like Batman Year One in that way, as he's like just starting to get his bearings. He doesn't really have all of his witty one-liners down yet. He's not aura farming very well at this point in his life, but he's out there. You know, he's actually trying to like take demon hunting contracts and help people out when he doesn't get bored and just leave a job, as you find out in Radiant Dialogue is a problem that Dante has. It seems like Dante is still really young. He's still really naive and has a lot to learn, which I think makes sense for the approach of this show. One of the tropes that goes on throughout the show is that when Dante's shooting guns, he's gripping them too hard, so he tends to break them after clearing a clip or 2. He's with a gun in his hand a lot less in the show than you'd think. He's punching and kicking a lot more than I had expected, I guess, and it's a little weird. I mean, you have to understand one particular point when it comes to these types of adaptations, and I think the Halo adaptation, you're gonna have to stick with me here, had a lot of this same problem, and it's that when you have characters that are dramatically overpowered in your setting, it becomes a difficult balancing act in creating scenes that aren't boring because the person is too strong, which I know sounds kind of stupid. I mean, depending on what show you're watching, like if you're into Sakamoto Days or into Mashal or anything, seeing an overpowered character dominate in their field is kind of a great thing. And historically, that's something that Dante does all the time. But as I mentioned, this is the Netflix team going in their own direction with the story, and this is also the youngest that we've seen Dante in any of these iterations. I think it's fine. It's just it just makes certain things weird. And the fact that they have to like cater to the plot and limit their power, in this instance, Dante's power, stands out. But another thing that didn't make sense to me as the story progressed was the cast of devils presented in the actual show itself. For the devils, we got the Chevalier Demon, which I guess is like a Lancer Demon, which I think might have been from 5. I don't think I finished 5, so I couldn't tell you, but his design looks very close to like Urizen and other demons of that game, like very hyper realistic, very dramatic. So I think he's probably from there. They have Echidna, which is a boss from Devil May Cry 4 that both Nero and Dante fight, and Dante eventually kills in the game. But then they also have Agni and Ruda, who are the first real bosses you fight in Devil May Cry 3. And they kind of make sense to be there because they were always like bumbling goons. And with the Mauler twins being out in... Could you throw the little, like the... From the Mauler twins being from there, it makes sense to have like 2 big buff goons arguing with each other. That's like a trope in TV right now, so I would expect to see it a little more in other places, and I think it works. Using them as like jobber demons to just have around for Dante to thrash about on works. I get you're just using characters to appeal to the audience and be like, hey, these are people that you saw from throughout the Devil May Cry story, and it's our version of the story, so we're just putting them in. But it's like, the chemistry between the characters feels a little forced. Like they themselves are kind of like reluctant allies and acknowledge it in the show that they wouldn't really be fighting on the same side if they didn't have a common cause that was uniting them. And I mean, like, you could argue that there's a little bit of realism behind that in like coalitions, but it just felt weird because, at least in the case of Echidna, you could justify why she's there, but she's still such a proud individual that I'm not sure she would just kind of like work for other people in that regard. Those are the main demons. You got the White Rabbit. And then you have one more like super titular character in the show. And this character I don't want to say I have complaints about, but the changes to her existing character I feel are more a detriment than they are an actual benefit. And that would be the character of Marianne, or Lady, as Dante calls her in the show. If you took the writing from Forspoken, but then added like all of the cussing dialogue from like Black Ops Rogue, it's not a COD game, but it was this game that was famous because of how much cussing was in the game. Like that's her whole character. She's just so insufferable to listen to the whole time. Like she's like a kid that just found out that she can cuss in private if people don't like hear her, and she just keeps cussing. Between that and the changes to her character, I'd say that's my least favorite thing about the show that is its own take. It's just that they took a pretty cool like femme fatale character and they just made her so much less appealing. The big curveball of the entire anime, if there was one curveball, is episode 6. Episode 6 is entirely an exposition-filled episode where you find out that Lady and the White Rabbit are interjoined, as their backstories directly tie into each other without Lady really being aware of it. You end up finding out that the White Rabbit is the sins of her past in one way or another. But there's this moment where a child who would eventually grow up to become the White Rabbit like steps into the demon world and the animation changes, and it's such a jarring like swap in styles. It feels like something almost out of Adventure Time, but it's like the best fucking part of the whole anime because it goes through this really interesting segment where you see him growing up amongst demons and actually have a type of society and civilization of their own in Makai, or the demon realm. The problem is that the air is poisonous and larger devils and devil lords roam around and subjugate anyone and everyone they can. So, in an effort to bring his newfound people out of their toxic environments after losing someone very dear to him, the young man invents a portal technology. Well, really like a portal opening technology. The portals are a naturally occurring phenomenon where these tears in reality occur, allowing demons to kind of get in or out of hell. But stronger demons get stuck and kind of plug things up, so it's really only for weaker folk. It's a perfect scenario as far as things were concerned. They're all smaller civilians, so these demons who are just looking to make better lives for themselves are taking the opportunity to go through and get into our world. However, during one of these excursions, we see that Lady and her team from Darkcom show up, and effectively you have what is, without being really, while being very blunt about it, is basically like a US border crossing catch in progress, and they just open fire. Like, Lady and her team just kill all of the civilians as like a bigger demon comes in, but they were already kind of like primed to kill the civilians anyway because they saw them and they're like, you look different than me, so I'm gonna kill you now because you're invaders and everyone like you is scum. Really interesting social commentary from the Yahoo Pizza Man show. Nevertheless, this traumatic experience is not the end of this young man, and he will eventually become the White Rabbit, as you find out. And then that's kind of what it becomes, is that the White Rabbit is looking to Avatar Korra things and reconnect the barriers between the demon realm and the human realm so that everyone can be intermingled again, even though it does mean more than likely all of the humans will die as demons of various sizes invade. But it does mean the demons of the smaller caliber will be able to cross over and not be stuck in a poisonous environment that is literally made to kill them. It becomes a whole dilemma and crisis, and it's very weird. Devil May Cry, at least in the sense of the games, never takes the opportunity to truly humanize the devils or demons that you fight. It's much closer to something like Freerun, Beyond Journey's End, where the devils and demons really just manipulate scenarios in the background or take the opportunity to manipulate words or emotions to get the better of humans. Dante, time and time again, has exploited this when devils undermine his abilities, his intelligence. They mistake his charisma for bravado, things like that. And there's never like a gray line. It's very much devils suck, not devils suck less. But in here, they decide to go with, like I mentioned, the social commentary route and make you question, like, are Makaians really unjust for wanting to have a better life, even if it means that they're immigrating into another nation, or in this case, plane of existence illegally? Is it a terrible thing that they're running away from inhospitable conditions and aggressors who would see them suffer purely for the sake of things? But interesting stuff nonetheless with the way the world is at present. And I'll have to say, man, I wasn't expecting all that from Devil May Cry. So, kudos. Honestly, not even mad at it. I've seen some comments saying that the show had no place to try and stand on a soapbox like that and talk about issues, but fuck it. Any platform, right? Good for them. There are some very cool choices and scenes scattered throughout the 8 episodes that we were given for Devil May Cry. And I think in these moments, whether it be the references to the greater Capcom universe, references to the Devil May Cry universe, like seeing the main protagonist of Devil May Cry 2 at the end of this season, I think they focus on the wrong things. I think that they took a chance, and I'm not so sure they stuck the landing. And I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, which is above the mid-range, but I'm not gonna put it much higher than that. If you are looking for a hardcore, story-accurate adaptation of the Devil May Cry series, at least from the perspective of 1 through 5, this is not for you. However, If you enjoy the Devil May Cry mythos and you're looking to watch an anime that's short and has some cool action scenes and some funny nods to older stuff in the 2000s, this might be for you. So 6 out of 10 for me. I shot most of this from the hip, and that's what it feels like the Devil May Cry people did. Okay, that's my last jab. That's my last jab. All right, I'm done. You know, thanks for watching. I appreciate it as always. Check in the description or in our channel page itself to check out any of our other videos. We've got tons of stuff in plenty of spaces and places. And thank you as always for watching and listening to me rant. I do appreciate it, Internet. To the next one. Peace.